The Chipmunks New Neighbors by Brian Holmes, illustrated by Erin Holmes. Last autumn, two chipmunks lived quite happily in a hole in the ground under a big evergreen bush. The bush runs along the side of a large building. It was the chipmunk's habit to come out in the cool mornings to look for seeds and nuts in the soil and under the dry brown leaves. After breakfast, Mr. and Mrs. Chipmunk sat on sun-dappled branches and cleaned their striped brown fur. On hot or rainy days, they stayed dry and cool in their comfortable underground den. It was a superb life. The chipmunks spent their days collecting food and bedding to store in their spacious den. Winter was coming, and they would need all the supplies they could get to see them through the cold days and nights ahead. Finally, winter does arrive, and neither hide nor hair of the chipmunks is seen. They have retreated to their underground home and are sleeping until spring. White snow piles up on the bush and the surrounding grass. Soon, the entrance to the den is blocked by many inches of fluffy white snow. Wind and bitter cold grip the land as the chipmunks rest peacefully in their warm nest. Several months later, spring arrives with cool rains chasing away the blankets of snow. Some weeks later, Hoover, the local groundhog, did not see his shadow, so winter clung to the neighborhood a little while longer than usual. But now so much snow has melted and so much rain has fallen that the chipmunks can no longer stay inside their damp den. It's time for some fresh air and some fresh food. Mr. Chipmunk climbs the muddy hole from the den to inspect the wider world outside. It's wet and cloudy, and the oak trees are just beginning to show some young green buds. As damp and cool as it is, he ventures out anyway. Once again, there is activity under what had been a quiet evergreen bush. In fact, the chipmunks seem to be making up for lost time as they dash here and there, gathering seeds and new bedding for their den. But the pleasant routine under the bush is about to become a little more unpleasant for the lively chipmunks. The robins. A few days later, a bird, a red-breasted robin, shows up in the evergreen bush looking for a place to build her nest. The bush seems to her like it's the perfect place. It's quiet, shady, and the nest would be well hidden from predators. Her mate, Mr. Robin, agrees. The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Robin start building their nest in the top branches of the bush, 4 feet above the chipmunk's front door. Mr. Chipmunk wakes up and can't believe the noisy racket outside. After peering out the hole to investigate the cause, he says to Mrs. Chipmunk, "There are 2 birds moving in upstairs. We can't have these noisy intruders living above our heads. The nest building, the flying back and forth, the constant chirping. Why, we won't have a moment's peace, and it'll disturb the babies you're about to have." "I agree with you," said Mrs. C., quite alarmed by the morning's commotion herself. "But what are we going to do about it?" "We'll chase them away from here before they get too settled in." Mrs. C. agreed, and the next time one of the robins came hopping through the branches with twigs in its mouth, the two of them chased the surprised robin out of the bush to a safe perch in a nearby oak tree. For the moment, the chipmunks were happy with the job they'd done and settled back into their search for seeds and leaves with which to line their own nest. But Mrs. Robin was speechless. She sat there for an angry moment until Mr. Robin landed next to her with a twig in his mouth. "Those chipmunks just chased me away from my nest. What do you think about that?" "We could try talking with them. There's plenty of room in this bush for our families," said Mr. Robin. "Okay," said Mrs. Robin. "You go see if you can reason with them. They're a little big for their britches, if you ask me. I'll give them a good peck if you can't talk some sense into them." So Mr. Robin dropped the twig he'd been carrying and flew down to the bush to feel out the situation. He didn't have long to wait. Mrs. C. made a beeline right for him. Now he could have stood his ground. Chipmunks are smaller than robins after all, but he also knew they had some sharp little teeth. So he flew back up into the oak tree branch where Mrs. Robin stood waiting. She looked at him with a grin and said, "So how did the discussions go?" "Very funny," he said. "You know very well that I didn't even have a chance to open my beak before that chipmunk was on me. They are crazy, you know that?" Mrs. Robin nodded her head. "Yes, they are. And I suppose if we are going to keep our nest, it's such a nice spot after all, then we are going to have to be a little crazy too." Before Mr. Robin knew what she meant, she leaped off the branch and went after one of the browsing chipmunks. She landed near the chipmunk and gave the surprised Mr. C. a peck in his hind quarters. Now Mr. C. did not appreciate being pecked in the behind one bit. It was a sharp shock. He turned around and chased Mrs. Robin a few feet away from the bush and then turned to head back under the bush. Mrs. Robin wasn't finished, though, and pursued Mr. Chipmunk again. Mrs. Chipmunk was there this time to help, and the both of them chased the robin away from the bush again. Mr. Robin, seeing that Mrs. Robin needed his help, joined her in the pursuit of the chipmunks again. For the next 5 minutes, it seemed as if there were chipmunks and robins everywhere. It was a mad chase, back and forth, up and through the branches, and out into the lawn. There were pecks and bites exchanged, but none of them got really hurt. Meanwhile, the chipmunks were very tired. They had not had to do so much running since last summer, and were surprised at how out of shape they were. Not to mention that Mrs. Chipmunk would be having babies in a matter of days. So the two of them made their way down into their den, where they did not speak until they caught their breaths a few minutes later. "Well, what now, Mr. Chipmunk? We haven't chased those birds away, and now they're acting like they own the place, even though we've been here for 2 years. Tomorrow morning I'll try and talk with the male robin. Maybe they can be reasoned with, as stubborn as they seemed to be. The two of them then fell deeply asleep, worn out by the workout they'd just gotten. Mr. and Mrs. Robin were tired, but not so tired that they could not finish making their nest. "Thank goodness that's over," Mrs. Robin said with a sigh. "Maybe they've come to the conclusion that we won't be such bad neighbors and that there is plenty of room in this bush for all of us." "Ha!" Mr. Robin was skeptical. "They're probably down there plotting new attacks against us, even as we speak. I say we stay on guard, no matter how quiet it is right now. This situation can't go on like this for long, what with the babies coming." Mrs. Robin nodded her head, but was still hopeful. The two of them worked hard for the rest of the day and had completed the nest before nightfall. New day, same neighbors. The next day dawned bright, a beautiful spring morning. The sky was blue and the air was warm. The robins were up early, as always, digging up wiggly worms for breakfast and putting the finishing decorative touches on their new nest. With good intentions, Mr. Chipmunk poked his head above his hole and looked around. "Good," he thought. "The male robin is at the nest while the female is off in the grass looking for worms or whatever it is they look for. I'll just go up to the nest and try and have a man-to-man talk with the fellow." As he left the safety of the hole, Mrs. C popped her head out of the ground to keep an eye on Mrs. Robin. Mr. Robin stood on the nest, weaving a bit of colorful ribbon he'd found earlier into the nest. Mrs. Robin liked a pretty nest, he thought, and he was running the ribbon in and out of the twigs of the nest. He saw Mr. Chipmunk approaching out of the corner of his eye. "Aha!" thought Mr. Robin. "Here comes the sneak attack on the nest, just as I'd thought." He called out a trilling alarm signal to Mrs. Robin and dove off the nest towards the surprised chipmunk. Mr. Robin barreled into Mr. Chipmunk, knocking him off the bush's branches and into the ground below. Mr. Chipmunk wasn't hurt, but he was stunned and shocked. Here he was, ready to talk and try to negotiate for a more peaceful evergreen bush, and what did he get for it? Knocked to the ground like a villain in a comic book. He shook the dirt off of his fur. Mrs. Chipmunk had seen the whole thing and wasn't happy, not in the least. She ran herself straight at Mr. Robin, caring nothing for her own safety. Mr. Robin yelped as he received a stinging bite from Mrs. C. Then Mrs. Robin joined the fray by chasing Mrs. Chipmunk back under the bush. For the moment, the robins perched in the branches of the oak tree to regroup. Mrs. Chipmunk went to Mr. Chipmunk to see how he was doing after his fall. "I'm fine," he said when she asked. "It'll take more than one blindside hit like that to keep me down. Apparently, our neighbors do not want to act very neighborly. I'm ready to return the favor by making their morning very unpleasant, if you are." "I'm glad you're fine, Mr. C, but I'm feeling a little queasy at the moment. I think our young ones are ready to make their appearance into this world. Let's go into the den so you can help make me a little more comfortable in preparation for our pups." "Dear, You are looking a little faint. Let's get you downstairs and forget about our nasty neighbors for the moment. There'll be plenty of time to deal with them later." And with that, the two chipmunks retired to the comfort of their den to prepare for the new arrivals. "Well, it looks like you've made an impression on the two of them, Mr. Robin. Again, they're retreating into their hole in the ground. I think they'll think twice in the future about sneak attacks on our nest. And it's just as well, because I think the eggs are ready to be laid today." "That's very good timing, Mrs. Robin. And just as the nest was finished and our rambunctious neighbors put in their places, perhaps we'll have some peace now so you can sit these eggs for a while." Mrs. Robin shook her head sadly. "I guess you were right about them, dear. It's not bad enough that we have to worry about cats and hawks. There is just no dealing with mad people." Mr. Robin nodded his head in agreement and led the way to their nest. Mrs. Robin sat down, trying to relax, preparing herself to lay the eggs, which would not happen unless she was relaxed. Mr. Robin was a comforting presence on the side of the nest, keeping watch for further sneak attacks from the chipmunks. But there was no sign of them, and under the cover of a quiet night, Mrs. Robin finally laid her eggs. "What a relief," she said to Mr. Robin. "Now all I have to do is sit here until they hatch. I hope you know you're going to be getting some food for me for the next couple of days." "I know," said Mr. Robin. "I remember what happened last year. I also remember flying miles and miles just because you had a taste for Japanese beetle grubs." "I am sorry about that, dear. I was sick to my stomach after eating them, so just plain old worms are fine for me right now." "Can it wait for first light at least?" "Sure it can, Mr. Robin. Good night." "Good night, Mrs. Robin." Things in the chipmunk den were even more exciting than in the robin's nest. Under the cover of darkness, Mrs. Chipmunk had given birth to 5 squirming chipmunk pups. She looked relieved. "As difficult as childbirth is," said Mrs. C, "I always appreciate their cute, closed-eyed faces when they get here. Look, honey, that one down there by my foot looks just like you. He'll be Ron Chipmunk Jr." "Yes," said Mr. C. "He's a strong-looking little guy. I just hope we can keep him and his brothers and sisters safe from our peace-hating neighbors." "We'll protect them with our very own lives. You know that, Mr. C." Mr. Chipmunk looked with pride at his young pups and their stoic mother. "Yes, I know we will, dear. I know we will." However, his thought to himself was that difficult days lay ahead for them. Chaos in the evergreen bush. Mr. Chipmunk's worry played itself out just as he suspected over the next days and weeks. Every time he went out to get some fresh seeds or nuts, he was attacked from the air or the ground by one of the robins. Naturally, he returned the favor, giving as good as he got from them. But at least they were only attacking one at a time, he thought. The other had to watch their nest, just as Mrs. C had to stay with his pups. As the days went by, the pups' eyes opened and they were exploring their surroundings. It was all Mrs. C could do to keep them in the den. When they finally did wander outside, chaos was the result. At this time, the robin's chicks were getting well developed, and that meant that the two robins could leave the nest at the same time to search for food. This was bad for the chipmunks, however, because to the robins, every free-roaming pup was a danger to the chicks in their nest. At first, Mrs. C was able to scold wide-ranging pups back to the nest before they became targets for the robins. But the chipmunks soon lost control over their adventurous young. No part of the evergreen bush was off limits to their curiosity. Even the lawn outside the bush was fair game for exploring. It was all that Mr. and Mrs. Chipmunk could do to protect their young from attack. And attacked they were, though none were hurt. Mr. and Mrs. Chipmunk did their best to protect the young ones and to retaliate against unprovoked attacks, but it was a losing battle. One day, Mrs. Robin decided that her young chicks were ready for flight training. She waited for midday, when she knew the chipmunk pups would be napping, and nudged her babies from their comfortable nest. These young robins could not have been more surprised. They were quite comfortable where they were, thank you very much. What is our mother doing, knocking us out of our home like this? The three young birds hit the ground and regrouped a little ways away on the top of a picnic table. "What's up with that?" said one of them to the others. Another answered, "Maybe she wants us to get some food for her. Let's get a worm and bring it back to Mother at the nest." "Good idea," said the other two young ones. The three of them hopped down off the picnic table and dug around in the ground until they had each come up with a worm. "Okay, let's bring Mom some dinner." The three reached the nest by hopping through the branches of the evergreen bush. They sat there until their mother arrived. Then they offered her the worms. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I can get my own worms. You kids have to learn to fly. So out you go." And again she nudged them from the nest. Mrs. Chipmunk watched the action that afternoon from the south entrance to her den. She was amazed at Mrs. Robin's carelessness toward her chicks. Surely they deserved better than to be shoved rudely out of their home. In fact, it was all Mrs. C could do to keep her own young ones from escaping and not looking back. Despite all of her efforts, 2 of her 5 had already left, headed for the nearby woods and a more exciting life. Though she was able to keep the remaining 2 girls and Ron Jr. corralled, she remembered what had happened last year and resolved not to fight them if they wanted to leave. "You can only hold on to these pups for so long," she said to Mr. Chipmunk. "After that, they have to make their own way. We can't even be there to protect them." The neighbors get a visitor. A couple of days later, Mr. C was out looking for food. He was in the lawn outside the bush. The young robins happened to be trying out their wings from the nearby picnic table. Mr. C was interested to see them unfurl their wings and flap them wildly in an effort to fly as they leaped from the tabletop. Sometimes the young birds would get a little further out into the grass than they did the time before, but their landings were usually an ungraceful tumble. Then they'd get up again and hop back up to the tabletop for more flight practice. It looked so comical that Mr. Chipmunk had to laugh. But he was also aware of his surroundings as he picked through the grass. In his scans of the area, he became aware that the birds had attracted some unwanted attention. A black cat had crept dangerously close to where the young birds were practicing. He had focused his attention on the young birds, knowing that he had an easy meal in at least one of the flightless robins. Mr. Chipmunk had to think fast. No matter what had been going on between the chipmunks and the robins, he did not want to see their innocent young fall victim to the teeth and claws of a hungry predator. He ran towards the black cat, and as he neared the feline, he began calling out in alarm. The cat had been focused entirely on the birds, and was surprised by the chipmunk's noise and movement. He quickly backed away. Then he saw the chipmunk run past him toward the bush. The cat bristled with anger that he'd been frightened from his feast by something no bigger than a mouse. He angrily chased Mr. Chipmunk toward the bush. Mr. C was shouting to everyone as he ran. "Mrs. C, robins, cat! The young are in danger! Cat! Cat!" The robins were nearby, and noting the location of their young, were quick to respond. The birds swooped down on the cat before it reached the bush. Surprised again, the cat stopped in its tracks. He backed up a little, but decided to meet the brave attacks from the birds with swipes from his front paws. Mr. C had made it safely to the bush. Both chipmunks realized that the birds had the cat stopped, but not discouraged. The robins were in real danger. They ran out to give the cat their usual nip and runs, the same kind of attacks that they used on the robins. Back and forth they ran, biting when they could get close to the distracted feline. The cat was confused. There were birds attacking from the air, hovering and pecking, and now it seemed as if 10 chipmunks were dashing to and fro, trying to bite him. He could not keep track of all the beaks and teeth around him. Outnumbered and outsmarted, the cat turned towards the woods and ran. The robins stayed close behind, nipping at the cat's heels to make sure he got the message to stay away. For the chipmunks, the battle was over. Safe again under the bush, a breathless Mrs. C tried to convince her remaining pups to remain in the den. But they were too interested in the hubbub that had been going on outside. Too tired to do anything else, she and Mr. C sat on the ground and caught their breaths. The robins returned a short time later from their aerial badgering of the cat. They landed tiredly on the ground, a short distance from where the chipmunks were resting. Mr. Robin spoke. "Thank you both for your bravery just now, especially you, Mr. Chipmunk. Knowing the danger, you put yourself in the path of that beast. I thank you. You have saved our chicks' lives." "Yes," agreed Mrs. Robin. "We can't thank you enough." "Well," said Mr. Chipmunk, "the threat was to both of our families, and I have to say that were it not for your very brave attacks on the cat, Mrs. C and I would have been no threat at all to that animal. I thank you both for ours and our pups' safety." Now it was Mrs. Chipmunk's turn. "It's clear that we got off on the wrong foot as neighbors. And I'd like to say that I'm sorry about that. We've been wasting our energy protecting ourselves against a threat that we thought was there, but wasn't. We were a little over-concerned about protecting the children, and things just snowballed from day one. I'm embarrassed at how we've treated you. There was silence as Mrs. C's words were thought about by the robins. We could say the same thing of ourselves, said Mrs. Robin finally. Hopefully this near disaster can begin a better relationship between us. Mr. Robin and the Chipmunks all agreed. Empty nests. After that, there was peace between the two families. The Robins and Chipmunks talked every day about their young and the goings-on around their shared homes. And if any new threats arose, each family knew that they would have an ally nearby to help them. Soon, the last two chipmunk young had left the den for good. Mr. and Mrs. Chipmunk were sad, of course, but they knew that it had to happen. One morning, when the chipmunks were digging up seeds under the bush, Mrs. Robin was also looking for worms nearby. Mrs. C walked over to the busy bird. "So they've all gone off now?" "Yes," nodded the robin. "Our time with them is much too short. A couple of them are still in the area, but they hardly give us the time of day, if you know what I mean." "I do," agreed Mrs. Chipmunk. "But there isn't even one of ours left nearby. I guess they have to make their own dens and their own lives somewhere else. The time we have with them is too brief." Mrs. Robin nodded in agreement. "You have to know that we would never have harmed your young ones. It's just that your early hostility caught us off guard. We had to show you that we would protect the chicks with our lives." If Mrs. Chipmunk could have blushed, she would have done so now. "I'm afraid we didn't know what kind of neighbors you would be. We also had to show you that we would protect our pups. I'm afraid it just became a mess." "A spring of hostility that I shall not forget for a while," laughed Mrs. Robin. "And then friendship. It all worked out in the end." "I agree with you, Mrs. Robin. As a friend, I hope you'll make your home here again next spring." "I'll talk with Mr. Robin about it. I'm sure he'll want to, considering how brave and kind our neighbors turned out to be. In the meantime, Mrs. Chipmunk, enjoy your summer." "Thank you, Mrs. Robin. Enjoy yours too." Mrs. Robin tipped her beak into the dirt once more and came up with a fat worm. She took it into the tree branch above to eat it. Mrs. Chipmunk dug a seed from the ground and added it to the few others in her cheek that she would eat later in the comfort of her den. The end.